Thank you very much for coming. I hope no one's expecting a talk on horticulture and gardening, because that's something I know even less about than education. I suppose schools and horticulture have certain things in common, such as the eradication of weed, but that's probably where we leave it. We haven't got much time. I know you need to hear from these three very eminent educators, and what I would just say is that their respective schools and organisations I know very well, and we're greatly honoured to have one of the sons of the founders of Collingham here with us. There's much commonality in rowing, you'll find there, and so Will, the Fleming, Suzie, Longstaff, and Paul, thank you very much. Cal, thank you very much for coming today. Now, essentially, in the 20th century, there were very few, if any, public schools, big independent schools that were founded in London. What actually happened is that many of the established schools just got much bigger. And that's happened a little bit with Thomas's. What's very interesting about Thomas's is that you're seeing a ground-up growth. But this sort of Cambrian-type explosion of education schools in London is very new, it's very exciting. And I suspect what you all want to know is that if you find the traffic noise and the drilling on the street too much and you don't want to go to Westminster, what is the alternative for you? And is that alternative, just because it's new, a little bit risky, shall we say? What are the benefits of going to a new school? What can you do that a school that was founded many years ago can't? There was a piece of ecclesiastical legislation in 1179 which forced every cathedral in England to have a schoolmaster. So schools are very, very old, and this is something that you're all competing against in your own way. So I very briefly just like the three of you to just describe your schools and what the challenges are that you're facing in the current next few years, and where we're going to be in 5 years' time and 10 years' time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles, and it's really great to be here and to be able to talk about these exciting new options in London with you. So as Charles mentioned, I'm Will Fleming. I'm the Master of Thomas's College. So it's 11 to 18, day school, with one co-educational, with a small boarding house, weekly boarding. And what we decided to do in response to what Charles said to start with is we really said, right, it's a blank sheet of paper. What do you do with a blank sheet of paper? And we have built a school from the ground up which is pointed at happiness and children leaving who can be effective in the world, and which openly seeks to throw down a challenge to some of the established ways of working. So to give you one very brief example, our sixth form lasts 3 years, not 2. And I think that's a unique measure. So we really tried to think, well, what would you do differently if you had this wonderful opportunity to begin again? And I think the opportunity for all of you as families is joining a community which is entrepreneurial, which is new, which is not necessarily hidebound by what we've always done, can bring incredible benefits, especially when you're looking at your children and thinking that's what they're going to need in their lives. And finally, to pick up on the challenge point, it is tricky. It's interesting, especially if you go out in the world, and my background is St Paul's Girls' School and St Paul's, and if you go out in London and say, we're going to do it differently, we're not about being better or worse, but we are about being as good an alternative as any option you have there, but for different reasons. We are all in a system. We know this system. And for us to say we love some aspects of the system, but we want to do some things very differently, and this is why, even if you had an offer to any school in London, this could be a fantastic option for you. That's a real message we need to work very hard to communicate, but it's one in which we passionately believe. So that, I would say, is a challenge, or one of the challenges we've seen, alongside the million challenges of where does the sign go for the science lab, and how do you make that gateway work, and recruiting everyone, and all of those things. But they are exciting challenges to face.
Great. Thank you. Suzie.
Thank you, Charles. So I'm Suzie Longstaff. I'm Principal of London Park Schools. London's Park Schools was founded 2 years ago to do something very different in education in London. Now, I've worked in London, like all the esteemed co-presenters, for over 25 years in central London and London in education. And in that time, I've seen the schools in London get larger and larger and more selective and more pressured. And the pressure on you as parents and on your children is too much. So we believed there had to be a way of doing something different. What could we do that was different in education? So we founded a group of schools that provided a breath of fresh air to the London market. And when you come and visit London Park School Mayfair, which is literally a walk from here, or its sister school, London Park School Clapham, situated on Clapham Common, you will see something very different. You will see smaller, you will see more personalised, where your child is not just a tick in a register, where they are known and they know everybody else in the school. But at the same time, by having those two schools in Mayfair and Clapham and having our sixth form in Belgravia, we can combine together to offer a breadth of subject choice, a wealth of expertise, outstanding teaching and learning, but also the opportunity to think differently with smaller class sizes, more personalised support, and getting your children ready for the future careers that they face. And I know we're going to move on to careers later in this talk, and that is one of the reasons that London Park Schools was founded. It's grown really quickly in 2 years, and it's really refreshing to know that we have created something that actually there is a need for and we can support.
Thank you very much. Paul, you work in a tutorial college, and we might need to explain just exactly what the differentials are between that and a school. But
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I work at Collingham. Collingham has been running for 50 years, so not as long as the more established schools, but still quite a period of time. We're very small. It was set up by founding members, still in the family now. We have very small classes, so we have maximum of 9 students in a class, average of about 5 or 6. And what we're able to do is really help students who, those that are trying to stretch themselves, we can, with the small classes, we can really help them to achieve the maximum grades that they want to achieve. And those that may be challenging or find some subjects a little bit more challenging, we can really help them to achieve the maximum that they can. We can offer quite bespoke courses. Because the school is so small, we can maybe make timetables which fit in with students, maybe outside curriculum activities, and we've been doing it very successfully for 50 years.
May I just say a few points on this? Last summer, in the course of 3 days, I met 3 people who'd been at Collingham, and it had changed their lives. One of them had been disallowed at the much bigger school he'd been at previously to study science A-level, and he was an eminent surgeon. And that sent me rushing for a second opinion, or not, I can't remember, but it was very, very impressive. So there is a great benefit in what you do, having something smaller. The second point I'd make, and I was just reading this last night, that the Romans were in England for about 400 years. We know that they took education very seriously, but we don't have a single physical remnants of what they were doing. So the schools themselves, it's not the buildings, it's who's in them and what's going on in them, isn't it, really? Yeah. So could we please, in 5 to 7 minutes, dismantle the absolute ridiculousness of league tables, please, and disabuse everybody of their importance to your selection of school? Not that I'm biased or anything, but starting with Will, yeah.
So to give you a real-life example, league tables, obviously, parents want information. It looks like it helps. I can totally see the urge to do that, and it seems such a simple shorthand. But I remember being in a very academic environment, supporting a Year 12 student in tears, because it had become apparent to her, in her words, that she was the stupidest child in the school. And I said, well, that's a ridiculous measure anyway. And of course it isn't apparent to you. And she said, no, I got a B at GCSE. I was like, 1 B, 7 A stars, 4 A's. Who's counting? She's like, the school is. They publish their results on the website. They don't publish my results, but they publish all of their results. And there is only 1 B on that website. That's me. And that gives you an idea of what happens with narrow banding. It really suits some people. I've worked in and been part of brilliant narrow banded schools which have very similar ability levels and are at the top of the league tables. But my goodness me, it does not suit anybody. And there is risk in there. There is risk to that kind of bounce off that children will feel that. So the league table drives a culture where if you can get to the top, then your intake is automatic. They all score very, very highly on standardized testing, which means they're all going to get great grades, which means that in the worst case, your teachers can start to coast anyway, and they can start to have all the problems that come with this expectation of these great grades. And it's kind of a self-fueling fire which ignites some children, but it burns up others. And it starts from the madness of the league table. I completely agree.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we've got what we're coming across more. It's called like head schoolgirl syndrome. So students who are pressurised into becoming at the top, and then they burn out. And quite often we get them joining us, and they need a more warming environment, more caring environment, a pastoral care, everything to really help these students who are academically very strong, but they're just feeling too much pressure from the more established schools who are primarily concerned about the league tables. So we really help facilitate that to happen. And I think it's a growing trend, especially, I'm sure it's been discussed before, but COVID, I think, put a lot of pressure on students. So they want somewhere different. They want day schools quite often. They want to be going to a school where they can go home afterwards. And less formal environment, a less structured, formal environment, well, more structured, but less formal environment where you go to chapel. We don't have those things. It's a more welcoming environment.
Suzie, you're an expert on competition, having been an Olympic rower. Do you think parents are too competitive for the wrong reasons?
Well, I was going to say that I think league tables are a very crude measure. And what do you want for your children? What do we all want for our children? We want them to be happy, firstly. We also want them to make friends, but you also want them to gain those skills that are going to help them flourish in their future lives. Look people in the eye, work in teams, be resilient, have grit. Now, my story, if you want to bring the rowing in, when I was at school, I did have an academic scholarship, and I did play piano and violin to grade 8. But I was terrible at sport. I couldn't catch, and I was lucky when I made it into my second lacrosse team. They played lacrosse at my school. But I was probably the last person predicted to ever go on to the Olympics. I did go to the Olympics, and who knew that there was a sport for me, which was sitting on my bottom, shouting at people. I coxed the British Women's 8 for a number of years. I loved it. But if you'd looked at my profile at school, you never would have said that is the journey I was going to take. As a result of my coxing career, I'm passionate about co-curricular activities, about the opportunity outside of the classroom, about experiential learning, which are the skills which will develop the skills for your children, and also they'll have a lot of fun along the way. So yes, league tables are there as a crude measure. They are the bread and butter of some schools, but believe me, they do not give the measure of the worth of the school, of the development of your child.
That's very, very well put, but let's cut to the chase. Most parents accept that their children are going to need to go to university, and every week we read how increasingly unemployable you are if you don't get to one of the top universities, and I'm afraid it may mean doing a STEM subject somewhere along the way. So I think parents need to know that you can offer this as well as an ancient established school can.
And I think that's absolutely the case. So again, narrow band selection. I've been in an environment where one of my responsibilities was to encourage every child to follow their own path into university and tertiary education. There were 107 of them. 102 selected their own path, which was Oxford or Cambridge, out of 107. And they're great universities. But my goodness me, they're not the be-all and end-all, and you don't need to be in that environment to get into them in the first place, and that's the key thing. The truth is that universities are increasingly looking for how can we get beyond the grades, how can we get a sense of this young person. For example, in a whole wider range of work they're looking to see. US universities, which people are passionate about, are all about the child. And actually, if they're in an environment where it's individual and the child and the young person is known and supported by people who know them as the person they are, they have got every chance to get into the world's best outcomes, whether that's the world's best degree apprenticeship or the world's best university or all of the great new outcomes out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think we have students who go to universities in America, and they're not they could get into the Russell Group universities, but they're not looking for the Russell Group. They may be looking for East Sussex for social sciences, or they're looking for St Martin's to do an art course. So they're looking outside of the box, depending on what it is their strengths are, and we're very good at facilitating that and helping that to happen.
I read a report that came out today from the OECD about future careers. I don't know if you've seen it out there in the media yet. Nearly half of children at school today in the world do not know what they want to do in their career. And that career uncertainty is weighing on them really heavily. The report also said that children are feeling huge pressure of career expectation from their parents. I mean, we may have felt that when we were growing up, but apparently the pressure on children today is 10 times more because you're worried about them. So actually, what I believe you can do to set them up in the best way for their future lives is to give them the skills to flourish. Whatever university they go to, and we have increasing amount of conversations, increasing number of conversations about children who don't want to go to university anymore, who want to do something different, who want to follow different career pathways, because the world of work is changing. We all know that, but I don't think any of us really know what it's going to look like in 10 or 20 years yet. So the most useful skills is not to worry about, the most useful thing is don't worry about what university they go to, get them set up for life.
But that's all very well, but then suddenly you realise you've got a waiting list. What happens then? How do you select? How do you select for these qualities you're talking about?
So I completely agree with you. What happens when new schools start, and I'm sure, Collingham's been around for a long time and does what it does so well, and London Park's very new, and I'm sure would never take this route. But there are new schools out there. They start, they give the idea of something different. More and more people are attracted. You get the list of people coming along. They've all got data attached to them, these poor little children, these little data units down there. And you just cream off the top of that list, because if you do that, your results will get better. And if your results get better, you'll have more applicants, and you're into the same merry-go-round that we're so passionate about providing an alternative to. So basically, in the case of our school, we have a very data-light process. In fact, the majority of applicants do not need to do a data test for us. We just use some of the existing data they have. We have a very exciting playfulness of mind exercise, and we have a personal interview, and we are committed forever to selecting holistically from across the ability range. So you may get 141, which is the top standardized score in a data test, and you may get an offer. But you may get the kind of score that would see you get into no other London schools, or few of them, and get an offer from the rest of the process, because we will always pick holistically.
Can you give us an example of a question with playfulness?
So some test words, some test numbers, some test sciencey thinking. A word one might be invent a new letter to go into the alphabet, draw it, explain why. A numbery one might be look around the room you're sitting in right now and work out how many sheep could fit in it. Now, you can sit there and go, okay, volume, numbers, yes, I'll get my math skills out, because that might be the type of young person you are. But you can sit there and say, well, I don't believe in stacking more than 3 sheep at a time. That's cruel. So I'm only going to stack them in 3s. And it just encourages curiosity.
So you're looking at the fluid intelligence there, really, aren't you?
Fluid intelligence, yeah.
But coming back to this, parents will want to know that when you all become even more successful than you are now, there's still another school for them. Do you see that happening now, that private equity is being sort of let out of the box, so to speak, that it's going to be a good thing and allow lots of people to go to your schools? Or, as Sir Anthony Selden was saying this morning, he predicts that in 5 years' time, about half of the independent schools will be owned by private equity, and they have different aims and objectives to charities. Do you feel at all hindered by working for a commercial organisation? Is it a problem?
I find that all... I smile wryly. I worked in the charity education sector for 25 years. I was head of a very large school in London, which was an HMC school, and the headmasters' conference would say, oh no, we can't have private equity in education, but actually the conversations are changing. Private equity brings an agility and a level of thinking that the charity sector have not had in a number of years, and they're playing catch-up. So I agree with Anthony Selden. We'll see a lot of change coming. We're seeing a lot of change already, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing for your children. There's some fresh thinking in the market, and actually, I work for a company called Duke's Education, which owns a lot of schools that you will have heard of in London, including London Park Schools. It's passionate about education. It's passionate about your children's future. This morning, I have spent 2 hours at a sustainability day thinking about how we're educating our children to thrive in a world in the future and look after the world, but also how we're going to be a sustainable organisation. The organisations that are coming into London now are great, and I think we should embrace that. And I'm really excited about the future.
And many of the charities may surrender their charitable status. It may be that some of the great schools are actually commercial organisations before too long. But, yeah.
I mean, my one question, if you're thinking about the ownership structure of a school you're looking at, I would ask 2 questions. Now, you might not get exact answers because it's commercially sensitive, but you should get a good sense. What's the rate? What's the timescale? If it's somewhere like Eton, it's 500 years, 600 years, right? What's the timescale of your school? And what's the rate of return? Because to be honest, it doesn't matter if it's run by a charity or if it's run by the most cutthroat commercial organisation in the world. We shouldn't be making excessive profit out of children from parents. And if there are, I don't think there are, but if there are schools doing that, that's just wrong. So as long as it's within that range of what we think is reasonable, whether you get your funding from an equity fund or whether you get your funding from bank loans, which is the only 2 options nowadays, or whether you have an endowment and you get it from that, it doesn't actually really matter. It's the ethos and the system, I think. That's my view.
You'd agree with that, Paul, would you?
Yeah, well, we're family run, set up for 50 years. There's no intention for it to go down any other track at the moment, and the directors are very involved. So any decision that needs to be made can be made very, very quickly, which is one of the advantages of being a family-run school. And we're looking for the future. We're not going to be changing. We are going to stay.
Let's another question. When do you think, in view of these, what you've been talking about the wider holistic aspects of education, when do you think education ends and training begins, or is it a fluid process, or is there a?
When does education end and training begin?
What, in one's life?
I'll give you an example. My great-grandfather's education ended when he was 9, and he became a bookkeeper down a coal mine. So that was quite an extreme end to it. But what I sense is more of this talk, which I think is rather risky, about AI and all of that sort of stuff. So we're not Uri Gellers. We don't know what's going to happen. But at the same time, there seems to be more awareness of becoming involved in careers because the career path is changing so rapidly.
Absolutely. You should never, ever stop learning. That's probably why I'm doing an MBA in my spare time. I'm addicted to doing courses. Everybody, my family roll their eyes at me, but I love learning. And I think if you can inculcate that in your children, having that curiosity to develop that academic passion to always ask questions, we should never stop learning. And as the report in the OECD said today, our children are becoming more highly educated, but that still does not solve the levels of career uncertainty they have.
Do you think you're sufficiently intellectually highbrow as new schools?
Highbrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea that a school divides into an old school, which has got posh names for its teachers, and therefore teaches Latin and Greek, or a new school, which is all trendy and funky and might be owned by private equity and teaches entrepreneurship, that's just not the landscape. So I'd really encourage you to ask about the tone and ethos of the school. You know, for example, I can think of many examples of young children who are studying the most esoteric things in the world. I know a child who's coming to our school who's passionate about old Icelandic. You know, she's learning that outside of school. So it's actually about an environment where young people, whoever they are, can flourish. And coming back to your question about when education stops, everyone says AI will replace jobs. But a terrifying proportion of jobs are done manually. They're done still. There's not robots in factories. There are firefighters. There are people out there working. AI is not doing that anytime soon. What we probably want for our children is the kind of life where they have the freedom to choose what they're passionate about and the ability to learn their whole lives long. And so ideally, it never stops. But that's what we're trying to get for them, right? We don't want them to have to be down a mine at 9 years old and stuck in that routine. We want them to have that capacity to feel a sense of ownership over their lives. And if we can give them that, and we can give them the kind of values that help them share that, then I think we're doing a good job.
He was all right, I think, but thanks for asking. But I think parents possibly put too much reliance on schools. That this rather post-war welfare status view that the NHS should do everything and so should schools. It's their problem. Do you think parents are doing enough to engage with their children and engage with the schools? And are you encouraging them to do that enough?
Most parents are engaged with their children, I think, and they do want to obviously have the best future for their children. We have a very close communication with our parents, and we can help them to take whatever path it is that they're wanting to look for. So it might be, a lot of students, I think we talked about this already, they don't know what they want to do in their life at the age of 15, 16. So it's trying to open up as many doors for them. GCSE age is a stepping stone. It's not the be-all and end-all. A-levels are more important, and then obviously after that. So we are constantly engaged with the parents to try and ensure that the path that their children are following is the best path for them.
So Suzie, do you think you're doing something really new in education in terms of how you interface with parents and involve them?
Absolutely. I think there is still the best schools empower students to make the right decisions, not their parents. I always say that. And to be able to do that with small class sizes and to develop the skills and be in London where they will help to be empowered to make those right decisions, because we're in such a vibrant city. They're so engaged, if they can be so engaged in all that London offers, by doing that, that's new and innovative. We must not mollycoddle our children. We must empower them to make the right decisions. Whether that's new and innovative, I don't know, Charles. I think it's just good education.
Excellent. So we're going to have some questions in a minute, and then we might go back to very, very quickly raise hands. Yes. Just have to wait for Ingrid with her microphone.
Thank you. Bearing in mind that even in our lifetimes, a lot of the jobs that we're doing were never even an option, for our parents, that's going to be the same for our kids, if not doubly so, especially with the advent of AI. So how are you using AI not to replace all jobs, but to enhance people's thinking, children's thinking?
I can answer that. I've been grappling with the challenges of technology because I sense, I don't know how this room feels, there's starting to be an increasing backlash about the use of technology replacing the skills that you're learning in schools. Now, I also know students who've applied for jobs going through AI systems, and they have to fill out all the right words and understand the systems to even get an interview. So that is the challenge. The challenge is how to provide a really good education that does not replace the skills that you need to be taught, but with AI and using AI sensibly. And the way to teach that, I believe, is through programs of critical thinking, of developing the right skills of the curiosity, but be able to stop and think, what is that I've learned? But at the same time, we need to build the skills in technology, because if your child cannot use a computer or the tools that they will need in their future careers, then we're not doing the right. We're not serving them correctly. But at the same time, I think we're going to see an increasing move back to focusing on what can we do without computers. Now, I say that as a head of technology in 2 schools. I have computing qualifications. I'm really passionate about learning skills for technology. But I think we need to take stock and go, what do we need to do without computers? Get out there, get in the fresh air, play.
Well, what do you think? Just briefly.
Sorry.
Well, it's got to be a combination of both. We can't fight AI, we can't fight technology. It's there, it's with us. So it's about working with it rather than working against it. But alongside you, I do agree that we don't want to put too much emphasis on technology. I think there's so much more for making a human being, your child grow into a well-rounded human being that can work and function in the world to the best of their ability.
This is nothing new, is it, really?
And I'd say have fun with it, be excited about it, and understand how it works. So if you take a pixelated picture of Barack Obama and you feed it into an image enhancement program, Barack Obama will come out white. Why does Barack Obama come out white from that program? Because of the way it's been trained. So if we get them excited and understanding its limitations and its potential, and we teach fundamentally creativity, critical thinking, flexibility of mind, they'll be well set in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, when none of us know where AI will be by then, but they'll be able to use it whatever they're doing.
Yes, so we've got a quick question in the back here. Yeah.
Sorry, there's a microphone.
We
I
might
just
run on a
wanted
few
to ask
minutes
how
late.
you're how you're tackling the increasing problem of the number of students who are refusing to attend school, particularly post-pandemic, for a number of reasons.
Paul, this is something you're quite familiar with, isn't it?
We do have an increase in number of students, sadly, across the whole country who have dropped out of school, dropped out of the school system, refusing to go into school. We really can help them to get back into the system where we can have a blended timetable so they could continue with some of their lessons at home if that's what they want to do. But obviously the encouragement is to try and get them back into the school, to try and get them ready to go on to further education where it's going to be in an environment with people. It's hard. Yeah. It is a challenge. I mean, some students are really finding it very hard to get back into the school system. But we've got very small classes. The pastoral care is very good.
I'm chaffing at the bit to answer that question because there is a crisis in education at the moment. There are nearly 200,000 children who are have long-term absence from school. That's long-term absence. They don't fit into the traditional model of education. What can we do to support them? At London Park Schools, we founded a hybrid school in September of this year. We already have over 60 children attending our hybrid school. That's 4 days online and 1 day in school where they do the practical subjects of science, music, drama,
go on very long
make friends.
trips. And you can learn how to ski very well. Yeah. You have the hybrid school with the school in Verbier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so our students are based in. They come to Mayfair, and they do sport with Clapham and Mayfair as well. But we are supporting children who were not in education for whatever reason that was before, whether it was anxiety, they are neurodiverse. Or they just don't fit. They're a square peg that doesn't fit into the round hole that we've created for education. That is the joy of having a new schools group. You can think differently and think differently about education.
So, Will, you'd agree with this positivity emanating from our speakers that if you live in London, you're pretty well set, or do we need more schools? And there has been about a 10% growth, but that's how I would finish it. Do we need more schools in London, senior schools? And should parents be worried? Should they ease off on the pressure? Or do we have a problem?
So I would say that it's not about the number of schools. We need different options and sufficiently different options for families in London. And in my time in education, Suzie, you mentioned your time as well, I've seen schools homogenise and become more similar. And now they're starting to grow more diverse. And I think that is a genuinely excellent thing. And I think the fear needs to drain from the system. I mean, one simple example of that, all of these schools that will tell you, well, we have 1,000 applicants. It's wonderful. But remember, they're applying to every single school. And some of them, because their families are pushing them through 10 tests, are going to get 10 offers. So actually, it's not as scary as it feels on that side of the fence. And there will be a great option for each child. And I'm really passionate about that. I think we're very fortunate. And it's about having that excitement about what's possible rather than the fear of what might happen, because but I say that with total understanding of what it feels like to be facing the 11 plus. Do not get me wrong, but that's how I see it.
Would you have any closing comments on this? Are we well set? Or
I say to families in London, you are so lucky. You have got so many outstanding schools on your doorstep in London. I'm a school inspector in my spare time, and I visit schools outside of London, of which are the one for the the next nearest school is an hour away. You're so lucky. There's so much opportunity, and in that way, it does create confusion for you, and it is scary. But come and talk to any of us after after we finish today, we're happy to offer advice.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's the right school for your child in London. And as you were saying, schools are becoming more diverse, and it's not one fit for every child, and there is the right school for you.
Thank you very much. If anyone has any more questions, do feel free to come up to the front and talk. But thank you very much for coming. I might just end off with a view of one of the great horticulturalists, Humphrey Repton, who said that his father, I think, put a stopper on the vial of classical education, determined that I should be rich rather than well learned. And I think that gets to the crux of this, which is when do you really stop that academic education and think of the bigger picture? Or should you just let everybody get on with it and educate people for the sake of a good academic education? I think you know my answer to that. And good luck with your schools. I think
thank you.
You're doing very brave things with extremely good founders. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.